Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are delighted that you're part of our Reading with Your Kids family. We don't want you to miss an episode, so please be sure to subscribe to us. You can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, on Stitcher, on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Kimberlee Gard. She is the author of The Day Punctuation Came To Town. Before we invite Kimberlee in, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Unicorn Jazz by our friend Lisa Caprelli. Unicorn picture books have a way of captivating children of all ages, especially Unicorn Jazz with their magical tail shaped like a musical note. And this unicorn children's book, a shy unicorn, moves to a new magical land with her family, but she has trouble making friends with other animals. The Unicorn Storybook engages young readers while also imparting some valuable life lessons about the power of confidence, the value of diversity, and why we should celebrate what makes us unique. Unicorn Jazz, so much fun. Check it all out today at unicornjazz.com. Speaking of my friend Lisa Caprelli, the author of Unicorn Jazz, you can meet Lisa Caprelli live and in person, along with yours truly, at the Orange County Children's Book Festival coming up on October 6th in Custom Mesa, California. This is the largest children's book festival in North America, and we are excited to be a big part of it. We have a great exhibit booth, and we're going to be featuring my books, The Great Maritini, Real Magic, and also Love That I Matter to You. We're also going to be celebrating the Reading with Your Kids podcast at the booth, and we are going to have a number of guest authors join us. Lisa Caprelli, she is going to be there, and we're going to have a magical debut of the Unicorn Jazz plushie at the Reading with Your Kids booth. Dennis Matthew, the author of Bello the Cello, said he's going to be there with us also, and Marla Kumer and Helena Bailey are also going to try to make it down, along with some other fantastic guests. Check it all out. Oh, you can also check out the Reading with Your Kids Magic Show. It's happening on the Illustrator stage. Check it out today. Come to our booth. It's D5 in the yellow section. It's the Orange County Children's Book Festival, October 6th in Costa Mesa, California. Admission is free. Joining us right now from outside of beautiful Denver and Colorado, she is the author of an amazing new book from our friends at Familius Publishing. The name of the book is The Day Punctuation Came to Town. Please welcome to the show, Kimberlee Gard. Kimberlee, how are you?
I am so well, and I'm so happy to be on your show. Thank you so much. And a huge congrats to you. I saw that you were nominated by the iHeartRadio Podcast Awards as the best kids and family podcast. So what a nomination that is. That's something to be proud about.
Well, thank you so very, very much. I appreciate it. Yes, it was an amazing experience from the first time we learned that we were nominated last November, and then the award ceremony in January out in L.A., and just a lot of the recognition and the fact that our audience on iHeart just exploded after that. It was just really wonderful and gratifying and surprising, too, because all of the other podcasts that were nominated were parts of, like, big networks. You know?
Oh, wow.
And my wife and I were sitting in the audience, and she's the other podcasts are being nominated, and she turns to me, she goes, "What the heck are you doing here with these people? You don't belong here." But it's we work really hard, and my producer Fatima has worked really hard, so we're really, really thankful for that. And one of the reasons that we're I think that we're nominated is that we've had a lot of folks refer wonderful guests to us. And our friend Kate Farrow, marketing director over at Familius, was the person who introduced me to you and to your book. And I have to say, Kate was really kind to send me a copy of your book. But I have to tell you, I didn't get a chance to look at it because it came in, and my wife, who is a special education teacher, saw it, and she said, "This is mine." And she immediately took it into her class. So that is that's as good an endorsement as an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nomination.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. That is great. That warms my heart. And yeah, a huge thanks to Kate. She is one of my very favorite people in the whole world. I just love her. She connects us all together. So I'm very grateful for her.
So since I didn't have a chance to preview the book, why don't you tell us all about the day Punctuation Came to Town?
Oh, I would love to. Well, The Day Punctuation Came to Town is the second in the Learning is Fun series, put out by Familius and me. And it follows the little I who lost his dot. It has all the same characters. Sandy Sonke did all the illustrations, and she incorporated a bunch of the characters from the first book into the second book. So you have all the little letter characters, and then a new family moves into town, and they are the Punctuations. And they go to their first day of school, and the little letters don't recognize them as being letters. And the Punctuation family just explains who they are and the jobs that they do. And throughout the day, they start to build words with the little letters. And Comma just can't really figure out where he belongs in the bunch. So he starts to feel smaller and smaller, and goes out into the hall. And meanwhile, exclamation point is causing a lot of excitement in the classroom. Things go a little bit crazy, and too many words get built at once, and everybody tumbles outside. And then throughout it, Comma kind of realizes that he does have a purpose. His purpose is to slow down sentences, and it's a great introduction for kids to what punctuation is and how it's important and how it incorporates in our sentences, and just a little introduction to grammar. I think it's really important because a majority of the time, punctuation isn't taught to children until they are well past the first stages of reading. And so once it is taught, children actually have to go back and relearn what they've been discounting when it comes to punctuation. So this is a book that you can share with children at the same time you're introducing them to the alphabet, and when they're first learning to read and write words, and show them that there's also this other family that we use in our everyday English language that has a very important part. So that's kind of where the story comes from and the purpose behind it.
I love that for so many reasons. First off, I know so many people who could use a comma in their life, in their conversations. It's, they just keep going and going and going. But I also love the idea of introducing these rules of grammar in this really neat, fun story way that is very accessible for kids. I know that that's one of the things that really attracted my wife to the book, is the idea of, giving the kids, a visual of this really kind of difficult concept to grasp.
Exactly. And that's exactly what the purpose of the book is. Sandy, the illustrator, again, did such an amazing job of personalizing the characters, and just bringing them to life. So I believe it will help children just kind of grasp the concept of what a question mark is, what a period is, where you put them in a sentence, and when you use them. So it's just a great start for children to just really understand what that's about.
Now, what inspired you to create this series?
Oh, I'll be honest with you. I grew up with dyslexia. I really couldn't read until I was 10 or 11 years old. So I have struggled with punctuation my entire life, which I feel kind of like a hypocrite for writing a book about it, but it's because it kind of just stems from, where I was and where I grew up. I feel like so much was poured into me by teachers and educators just to get me to be able to read, that punctuation was something that was just kind of cast to the side. And so to be totally honest with you, I didn't really understand punctuation until late middle school. And we're talking like 8th grade, maybe even into high school a little bit, to really understand the structure of a sentence, to use punctuation correctly. So I was very late in it. And then my children also have dyslexia. And I saw in them what I had struggled with all my life. And that's really what inspired the day Punctuation Came to Town, as well as the little I who lost his dot.
You know, as you said, you kind of said jokingly that, maybe you shouldn't be the person writing this book because you struggled so much with punctuation. I actually think the opposite. I think you're the perfect person for it because you spent so much time, really kind of delving into it and worked so hard to grasp this knowledge and this understanding. I think you're the perfect person to share, because someone who, when things come easy to people, they just assume that everybody's going to come easy to everybody else, and they just kind of present it and, hey, here it is, just go for it. Of course you understand it. Whereas you understand that it's much more complex, and I think that, I think you have a lot more empathy for a reader who might be out there struggling as well.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I appreciate it more than you know, I promise. So thank you.
Tell us if you can, and I know this is maybe very difficult, but and I know I believe it's different for everybody, but can you kind of give us an idea of what you're talking about when you're saying you have struggled with dyslexia? What kind of struggles did you have? How did that make learning punctuation, learning how to read difficult for you?
It was something, back when I was growing up, it was not something that was diagnosed as it is today, to the extent. And even today, I feel like it's misdiagnosed a lot, or just missed. But when I was growing up, we're talking like elementary school in the early 80s, they were able to know that, like, I couldn't compete with the classmates. I could not read. I couldn't understand which letter was what. I had no recognition that, like, the letter H was an H, what a P was, what a Q was. So I got pulled out of class on a daily basis for special instruction, which helped, but was also very embarrassing at the time. And that lasted my entire elementary life. So I was pulled out into a group. We were called special readers, where it's just one-on-one attention with an educator. And I actually grew up going to a private a Catholic school, so it was taught by a nun. So I sat there as a nun, just tried to teach me how to read. And it was very, very, very slow. Over time I was able to understand what letters were, what their sounds were, but phonics was something that I just couldn't ever grasp. I think it's important for people to realize that people with dyslexia don't read the way normal people do. You can't really break words up into phonics and then sound words out. It's really a matter of just memorizing words. And once you have a good basis of memorized words in your mind and in your brain, then you're able to kind of put those together into sentences and be able to read a little bit better. But phonics is very troubling for most people with dyslexia, and it's just all about how you learn and how you are able to recognize things. So it's a big, confusing world for a lot of people who struggle with it, and most people don't know also that it's hereditary. So once my son was diagnosed with it, I had started to see in him so many of the patterns that I had struggled with as a child. And once he was diagnosed, I was like, oh, that's what it was all this time. It's something that my brother struggled with as well growing up. And we were never exactly labeled as dyslexic kids. We were just, we were categorized as people who had a learning disorder.
Mm-hmm.
So it's changed a lot. I think there's a lot more awareness of it now, but I also feel like there's so many kids who, and adults as well, who kind of slip through the cracks, who, have struggled with reading, but don't really understand why. And, I think that some of it is, the way that reading is taught to children now is not necessarily the way that all minds can receive it.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. Now, is it, you talking earlier about not being able to recognize certain letters. Is it that you would confuse them with other letters? The classic thing is that like a B would look as a D and a D is a B, that kind of thing, where letters are kind of reversed, or is it something different?
It is that to an extent. B and D and Q and P, they look very, very similar. And so if you reverse them in your head, obviously you're gonna have problems your entire life. So, I actually had little cue cards when I was a kid that taught, if I came across one of those letters, I would know which it was. I also had these little hand gestures that when you put your hands together with your thumbs up, it looks like a bed. And so you would know that B came before D. So there were little tricks that I was taught. But it's funny also how, the eyes and the mind can see things, that in specific print and type. So sometimes an A and a D even look alike, depending upon how the A is. If it's more of the circular A with the line, the brain can kind of see that as a D. So I think with people with dyslexia, if a parent starts to see that in a child, there are some amazing fonts that you can change documents to, that really distinguish letters into, very specific, letters. Mm-hmm. So, that can help out a lot. And it's been tested in, a lot of literary markets. And that's where you see, like the Diary of a Wimpy Kid book is a great example. They used a very easy font. And so children who struggle with dyslexia, that's an easy book for them to read, or just maybe not easy, but they can kind of get through it a little better because the letters, the font is so much easier to read than something like trying to think, is it New Times Roman or one of those fonts? Yeah.
Now, I also heard that there are different page colors that are more dyslexic friendly, for lack of a better term. The traditional stark white kind of page isn't as great as other shades of white. Is that something you've also heard of?
That's completely true. Sometimes your eyes letters actually can move around and almost vibrate on the page that is stark white. So if it's on like a light shade of pink or a light shade of blue or green, that's also very easy, a little bit easier on the eyes to see. There's also a great thing that my son used, which is it was almost like a ruler, but it was a piece of plastic that was colored pink, and you put that over the text, and it changed things for you so that you could read like one sentence at a time. But you're seeing it like through sunglasses in a way. So that was a fantastic tool that he used for many years.
That is awesome. In a minute, I'm going to ask you, about what kind of. Well, let's ask you right now before I forget, because my mind is like a sieve sometimes. What kind of things, can I imagine that there's some kids that might be struggling with dyslexia, but no one's kind of noticing. They're like, oh well, he's having a little bit of trouble reading, but she's figuring out her own strategies. What kind of things can parents look for that might be an indication that we need to investigate this a little bit and see if there are ways that we can help our kids learn better?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I think it's important to know that there's no cure for it. Mm-hmm. it's expensive to have a child tested and get the actual results of the diagnosis of being dyslexic. The schools will do it, but they will never give you an exact title of what your child is dealing with. They'll just kind of put it in a box, again, like what happened to me, and say, that they have a learning difficulty in some area. So, in our situation, we had our child privately tested, and that's where we were able to come up with the exact diagnosis of what was going on in his little mind at the time. Mm-hmm. However, that didn't really change anything because there was nothing that we could do to fix it right away. There are a number of things that parents can just do just to keep encouraging their child. And like you said, eventually they'll kind of figure it out on their own. It's just going to take time and a lot of patience. And they're just, each kid is individual and they learn at a different pace. And your child just may be slower than everybody else. But there are certain things like I said, memorizing words. So those index cards that you could write a word on and just like flashcards, just trying to get as many words into that vocabulary off of memorization is a great way to do it. Another thing that you can do is type out a sentence, again, in a font that is easy to read, and then cut those words up and have your young child put those words together in a sentence so that they begin to see how words connect to each other, because it doesn't do you a whole lot of good if you memorize a whole bunch of words but can't put them together in a sentence. And then there are other things that we talked about before. The bookmark that is shaded that can help you read a book. There are so many titles of books out there, from picture books to chapter books to middle grade, that if you just do a Google search of books that for your child's age with dyslexia involved in the Google search, you'll come up with some. Again, I referred to the Diary of a Wimpy Kid, but there's graphic novels and things like that have the text broken up, and so it's a little bit easier for a child to read and then feel like they've accomplished something, because I feel like those little wins along the way are so important for any child who's kind of struggling. It just means so much more to accomplish having a book read or a sentence completed or anything like that.
Absolutely. It's so very, very important for us to, we talked a lot about on the show about how important it is for us to let our kids fail and not wrap them up in bubble wrap and, protect them from every disappointment in life. But it's also very, very important for us to celebrate our kids' achievements and to find ways for them to be successful, especially when they're dealing with different challenges like dyslexia and other learning difficulties. I'm just going to throw this out there. It was just something as you were talking about memorizing words, and I guess that's called sight reading. Am I right about that?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. We've hosted a number of international students in our home, and a lot of those kids come from China. And in China, they don't have phonics. They've developed a way, but they're, the traditional way to read Mandarin is to read the characters, and every character is its own word. And so kids in China grow up learning all these different characters, 3,000 or 4,000 different characters, so they're able to read. I'm wondering if there's a connection. Our language kind of developed through phonics, and their language developed their written language developed in a completely different way. I'm not expecting you to have an answer. I'm just kind of rambling because that's what happens sometimes. That's my unique learning style. I see something and it makes me wonder. And just as you were talking about that, I was just wondering, how that happened with these human beings in different parts of the world, develop these languages and these written languages in completely different ways.
Oh, that's really interesting. I did not know that, but how interesting to be able to see that firsthand. That's neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about that. I do know that, our language is based on the phonics, and that's kind of how it's addressed in the school system. But I don't believe that that's always been the way it has been taught either. I think our grandparents were taught mostly just the memorization of words in those old readers that you see in the antique stores now. They just had those and they just read them and recited them and read them. So it's interesting to see how different cultures in different times address the changes of the learning curves and just address different things now.
Yeah. And I have to tell you, Kimberlee, I really enjoyed our conversation up until now when you're referring to the fact that the books I used in elementary school are now in antique shops. I don't know. I thought we were buddies. What's next for you?
Oh my goodness. We have some more books coming out. So as I was saying, this is, The Day Punctuation Came to Town is the second in a series. Around August of next year, the third book will come out, and that is The Mighty Silent E. And that talks about how, the letter E has the power to change words. So that one is neat because it does talk about, the difference of phonics and things like that. So, and then following that one, I believe the next year will be a book about vowels. So we're just addressing all of the fun stuff that kids learn, in their very first early stages of reading. So, and then we have a Snooze-a-Palooza is also coming out of fall of next year, and that's kind of a wintertime hibernation animal counting book.
Neat. That's really, really neat. I'm wondering, have you had any feedback from parents who have, their kids have been struggling and then they grab onto a book like The Day Punctuation Came to Town and it just throws a light switch on for their kids?
That book hasn't been out long enough to get a whole lot of feedback for. I truly hope it does that. I mean, that's the whole reason that we write books is to impress upon children's lives and just make a difference. I have heard some stories like that with the little eye who lost his dot. I think just because it's a different approach to the alphabet, children are able to see the letter characters in a different light, and with illustrations and just making them so personal, I feel like children are able to kind of identify with the letters a little bit more. So that has been such a fun journey to just see how children resonate with that book.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I know folks are going to want to connect with you online. Where can they, of course, you can find out more about The Day Punctuation Came to Town by going to Familius.com. But I'm imagining folks might want to know a lot more about you. So where can folks go to learn more about Kimberly Gard?
Oh, I would love that. I absolutely love to connect with readers and teachers, librarians, and parents. Again, it's why I do what I do. My website is KimberleeGard.com, and I am on all social media at the same thing, Kimberly Gard. And I'd love to offer, advice to parents and just ways to encourage children in their struggles. And my newsletter is a great avenue for any kind of teacher or parent who, wants to learn more or have tricks or tools in their tool belt to help their children learn.
That's awesome. And remember, Kimberly Gard is spelled KimberleeGard.com, KimberleeGard.com. We've had such a great day speaking to the author of The Day Punctuation Came to Town, the brand new book from Familius Publishing, Kimberlee Gard. Kimberlee, thanks. This has really been a fascinating look, not only at your book, but at dyslexia and a great look at how we can help support our kids. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you. It's been so much fun. I appreciate it more than you know.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. It is a STEM Tuesday edition of the show. Jennifer Swanson is going to be here to celebrate epic achievements and fantastic failures in STEM. That is the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. If you are the author of a wonderful children's book, we would love to have you as a guest on the show. Being a guest on the show gives you the chance to tell thousands and thousands of people about your fantastic children's book, and it is fun. It is easy, and it doesn't cost anything. That's right. It's absolutely free. All you need to do is go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the contact button. Let us know about your great book. We will let you know the next easy steps. We want to thank the folks who made today's show so very, very wonderful. Of course, we want to thank our guest, Kimberlee Gard. Be sure to check out the day Punctuation Came to Town. I want to thank my amazing producer, Fatima Khan. You can check out Fatima's blog at our website, readingwithyourkids.com. She always does an amazing blog giving you some deep insights into the show. I also want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support that she gives me. I want to thank Augie the doggy who has my back here in the studio at all times. And, of course, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.